Hey everyone, welcome to Zack Attack Reviews. I'm super excited to talk about Spider-Man No Way Home, the most anticipated movie of the year. Directed by Jon Watts, who comes back from Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home. He gets to wrap up his Homecoming trilogy, and obviously we know Tom Holland, the MCU Spider-Man, comes back to reprise his role with all his supporting cast, coming right off of Far From Home, where Mysterio revealed Spider-Man's identity to the world, that he's Peter Parker. And it's literally the moments of the end of that movie, it goes right into the beginning of this movie, and we get to see all the aftermath of that and how it affects Peter and his friends and his family lives in a negative way. And Peter decides to go to Doctor Strange and talk to him and ask him to do a spell to let everybody forget who he is. And as you've seen in the trailers, it goes wrong and it brings multiversal threats to the MCU, and Tom Holland Spider-Man has to take care of it. So I'm going to talk about what I liked. I'm going to talk about the good. Right off the bat, I want to say that I'm one of the biggest Spider-Man fans. I love Spider-Man, the character, from the comics, the cartoons, other live action adaptations, and animated adaptations. And I haven't been the biggest fan of the MCU's version. I feel like he's been Iron Boy and kind of been like Iron Man's sidekick for the most part, from Civil War up until this point. And that was always my major complaint. It was never Tom Holland's performance, it's just been the writing of the character. But now that, Tony's gone and he's more on his own in this movie, I finally feel like Tom Holland's Peter Parker and Spider-Man is starting to look like the character that I know and love. A lot of the things that they did in this movie was homages to past iterations and kind of shaping this character to be the Spider-Man that we know. He's not Spider-Boy, he's not Spider-Teen, he's feeling like Spider-Man. He feels like he's growing up. He feels like he's finally learning from his mistakes and finally be able to make hard decisions on his own, without someone coming in to swoop in and fix everything. This version of the character, the way where he starts off in the beginning of the movie and where he ends, feels like somebody that could lead the Avengers. That's how much character growth I feel like he went through in this movie, and it's all backed by Tom Holland's phenomenal performance. This is by far his best performance as Spider-Man to date, one of his best acting performances in any movie he's done. He's funny, he's charming, he's been all those things, but it's up to another level. But he also has very great emotional scenes. Like, think about how you felt in Infinity War, where he was like, "Oh, Mr. Stark, I don't feel so well." He does that multiple times in this movie, where it wrenches at your heart. And I really like this performance here, and I can see him becoming the best Spider-Man of all time in live action now that he has kind of been reset. Supporting cast comes back and they're also great, and they are knocked out of the park as MJ and the guy Ned was great as well. They're really good supporting cast of these characters that just are behind any decision he makes. Even when he makes a bad mistake, they just don't make him feel bad about it. They're like, "Look, we know where your heart is. We're gonna help you with it." And we have characters like Doctor Strange in here. He's great. When I saw him in the trailer, I thought he was kind of weird that he was gonna make this spell for Peter after how he was portrayed in past movies, but everything they did here made it make sense. The next big thing is the comedy. This movie was a lot funnier. Yes, Marvel movies are usually funny, but the jokes landed. There wasn't a joke there I had like rolled my eyes at. I thought every joke landed, and a lot of it felt like Spider-Man jokes, like jokes that specifically Spider-Man, not just any Marvel character could do. And I really was happy to see that, because Spider-Man, even though he can be like a dark, sometimes depressing character, at the end of the day, he is also a lighthearted comedic character. He makes quips, he's funny, he deals with comedic moments a lot throughout his history, and they really nailed it here, especially with the dynamics of his friends. This is the best performance of Zendaya's MJ and Tom Holland's Peter Parker as a group, or as a couple together. You really invested in them too. You can see that they actually really care about each other and love each other. If you were invested in that couple, you're going to be very happy where they go in this movie. All the actors did a great job with the emotional parts, but the physicality is where it shines as well. I think this is one of the best action movies that the MCU has done. The action here is better than any Spider-Man movie before this that's in live action, and it's one of the best action movies that they've done in the MCU in total. This is the best I've seen Spider-Man fight in live action. It's so great. It's so physical. The weight behind the punches and the actions and the bombs and everything feels you feel it. You feel like these people are trying to kill each other, and it's really great how Tom Holland's athleticism gets used, because he's a very athletic person in real life, and they use that as much as they can. Obviously, he can't really climb walls, so that's CG, but everything else is him, and it helps keep you immersed because you're not switching from Tom to a stunt actor every single second. So there's like a lot of times in Marvel movies, they have a lot of jump cuts, shaky cam. We got still shots of a lot of the action. We were just getting real intimate, and you feel it. And I was really happy, because that's one of my biggest issues with some of the Marvel action. It's too shaky, too many cuts. We were really in there, and they managed to be able to do some of the emotional moments within the action, so it brought it to another level. So I think, but all the characters did a really great job of creating urgency with their physicality, and then being very brutal with the fighting and the action, and having different kind of fights and set pieces as well. It didn't feel like each set piece was very similar. In terms of the story, I think this is a really good Spider-Man story. It felt like something straight out of the comics and straight out of one of the animated TV shows from the past, where, you know, Spider-Man is stuck in the middle of something. He wants to do one thing, but his responsibility is to do something else. And because of his mistake that he made during the spell, now we have all these villains from the past in the movie, as we saw Lizard, Electro, Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and all these people are here, and he now has the responsibility of figuring out what to do with them. And there's a lot of debate going on, what should we do with these villains? And Spider-Man, being the pure heart that he is, wants to help them. And it's just such a Peter Parker Spider-Man thing for him to do. And it made me really endeared to this movie, because it finally felt like he was making a decision on his own, and he was making a tough decision. He wanted to help people no matter what. That's one thing that, you know, it's a fault of Spider-Man as well, always trying to help his villains no matter how dastardly they get. And then we got to see a lot of Peter Parker's Spider-Man's intelligence, his resourcefulness, and him doing things on his own without any assistance from another Avenger or some AI. It was back to basics, which was really, really great. And I gotta say, the villains were great. Everybody that came back brought it as good as they could. We had focus on some villains more than others. Doc Ock, obviously, because he's one of the bigger villains from the past movies. And Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin. Oh my God, he was masterful. He was amazing. Willem Dafoe absolutely killed it. He was an absolute menace. And J. Jonah Jameson made me want to punch him in his face. Every scene that he was in, he was just so annoying, but that's how he's supposed to be. So I really, really enjoyed all the villains in here. Some of them take a little bit of backseat because obviously they're not as popular, I guess, and also the movie's filled with so many characters, so they don't get to have as much screen time or as much exposition or even action as other characters did. But the moments that they had were definitely cool. So this movie was definitely a roller coaster of action, comedy, and emotions, and it all culminated with one of the best endings in an MCU movie I've seen, or the best superhero ending in a long time. They did so many things right with the ending and making me interested in seeing what happens next. It was emotional, it was dark, but it also still had some hope and light in it. It incorporated all the tie-ins from the MCU to make you feel like, okay, where is this going to lead to go into the next thing, without the end credit scene yet. Like, there's 2 end credit scenes in this movie, and both those end credit scenes are also fantastic and funny. Well, one is funny, one is really serious, and they lead to other things in other franchises. But the ending of this movie made me really excited to see where Spider-Man goes from here. Now, there's all the praise that I have for this movie, because I absolutely loved it. I'm going to talk about some of the bad. There were some things here that I guess you could call them nitpicky, but I just want to express it. Something that I thought was weird, I thought that Jon Watts' directing, especially in the beginning of the movie, was really choppy. Like, certain scenes felt like they got cut in half, where we were having like discussions, or certain moments we just came into the moment without seeing how we got there, and it was jump and jump and jump. It just felt really weird in the beginning until we got towards the middle, where things started getting to breathe and we slowed down and we saw full scenes. It felt like full scenes instead of like jump cuts from one moment to another moment. That's how the first like couple minutes of the movie felt, and it was just really weird. And also there was just a lot of framing and like different things that he could have did to heighten the way the movie looked. that just didn't happen. But I have to give big props to the cinematographer, because this is one of the most beautiful MCU movies and superhero movies I've seen in a long time. I thought all that was great as well. Just the way the lighting and the way everyone looked, they all looked fantastic and sexy. But I just wish the editing and the directing was a little bit more clean. The movie starts off really, really strong and interesting. It has a mixture of like comedy, surprises with characters and things like that. But the middle of the movie slows down considerably. And a lot of it is because I feel like they were scared that people who are not in tune with everything that's going on, maybe haven't seen the past Spider-Man movies, don't know who these villains are. They had to do a lot of exposition of why these characters are the way they are. Who knows who, and it's just like, if you see somebody like me who's watched all these movies, it makes the movie slow down to like almost like a slog. I still enjoyed a lot of the moments because they inserted a decent amount of comedy in those moments, and then we still had a little bit of action here and there, but it was a lot of talking and it was a lot of stuff that I already knew, not like new information. So for some people, I feel like that middle is going to be a bit of a slog. Some people, it's going to be a rest because we had a lot of action in the beginning, and it kind of calms down and then revs back up for the climax and the emotional moments that happened before the climax. But yeah, that was just weird to me how they made that decision to like do a bunch of exposition of information that people should have just researched before they watched this movie. You should have seen those past Spider-Man movies so you know who these villains are. And like many movies, it has multiple villains in it and multiple characters. There's so many characters in this movie, but they are utilized mostly as the max that they can. Some of the villains take a back seat, specifically Sandman and the Lizard. They really didn't have much to do, didn't really have a lot of motivation or like an arc. Like Doc Ock, Green Goblin, and even Electro all had arcs. They had reasons to why they wanted to live and why they wanted to do what they were doing or whatever plan they were doing, and in Green Goblin as well. And those played out and they were executed, and I feel like the other two characters kind of took a back seat, and I understood a little bit because those two characters are probably like two of the least popular villains from the past Spider-Man movies, but also it felt like they didn't need to be in the movie if they were going to do that. But so that was a little bit of a negative to me, the misuse or the benching of some of the characters and not giving them enough breathing time to talk about their motivations or give them better motivations. It's the writing of the characters that was the problem. And as we all know, all superhero movies these days have to end with a big CGI fight, crazy fest. And this one does too. And for the most part, it's actually pretty amazing. The CGI is spectacular, pun intended. But there's a certain part that gets a little muddy where things get a little confusing. So that's just a bit of a warning if you haven't seen the movie yet. When you get to the end credits, you got to really pay attention to what's going on in that final scene, because there's a lot of CGI just going around and you can kind of get lost in that ending. But this is my verdict. Overall, I really love this movie. I'm a big Spider-Man fan, like I said before, and this had so many elements of different Spider-Man movies. It had surprises, some surprises that a lot of people who have been winking into, and some that I didn't see coming, and it just made me fall in love with Tom Holland's Spider-Man as the Spider-Man to, moving forward, and happy to see him become more like the classic character. It was just such a fun ride. It was the most fun I had in a movie theater all year. I haven't gotten to see a lot of movies in the movie theater this year, but this one was definitely worth it, and was worth the wait. All the hype. It meets all the hype. Now, for people who maybe wanted something meatier or a story that was maybe written a little tighter or edited a little tighter, or something with more substance, because there is a central theme here in this movie of the great responsibility and the consequences of having that responsibility, and that's like the basic Spider-Man thing that I guess we think about it, Tom Holland never had gotten to go through. Spider-Man hasn't gotten to go through, and he finally gets to go through it in this movie, and he makes tons of sacrifices in this movie. But if you're like, okay, I've seen that before, you want something a little deeper, this is not it. This is a very funny movie that has some really core emotional moments and a lot of nostalgia and callbacks. But it's just that it's mostly just a fun movie. So you just strap in if you're ready for a raucous ride, a lot of crowd pumping moments, and I have to give this movie an A. Go in not knowing anything. If you didn't see any of these trailers, good. Don't watch the trailers. Go in there just blind and butt naked. But if you have seen the trailers, do not look for anything else. Just go into this movie, avoid all spoilers, stay off of YouTube because people are nasty and mean and disgusting on the internet and posting clips of the movie on there. Just stay away from it. And also check out my next video. I'm going to be doing some rankings. I'm going to be doing the top 10 movies of the year, top 10 shows of the year. I'm going to rank the MCU movies now that the next movie that we have in MCU is going to be far away. I'm going to do like a tier list of all my favorite MCU movies. And also I'm going to rank my favorite Spider-Man movies. So like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you can check out all those videos. Also my Hawkeye reviews coming soon. And please comment all your thoughts down below and stay tuned.